meeting, informational meeting, a joint meeting between local government and communications and technology. I'd like to thank my fellow chair members who are here from local government, Chair Freeman and Chair Miller. Chair Titai is on the floor. We just testified for DCED, so he might be a few minutes late. So I just wanted to get started because I know we're all under the gun. So I just wanted to start with calling the roll. Noah, can you call the roll, please?
Chair Cerisi.
Here.
Representative Carroll.
Excused.
Representative Curry.
Leave.
Representative Davidson.
Leave.
Representative Doherty.
Leave.
Representative Inglis.
Leave.
Representative Kruger.
Leave.
Representative Napoleon Nelson.
Leave.
Representative Powell.
Leave.
Representative Prokopiak.
Leave.
Representative Rivera.
Yay.
Representative Rusnak.
Leave.
Representative
she's
Takak.
virtual? Oh, sorry.
Representative Waxman.
Leave. Takak. We call Takak?
Representative Takak.
Leave.
Chair Ortitai.
On his way.
Yeah.
Representative Barton.
Leave.
Representative Dorsey.
Leave.
Representative Day.
Leave.
Representative Gatos.
Leave.
Representative Irvin.
Leave.
Representative Ledbetter.
Leave.
Representative Eric Nelson.
Leave.
Representative Reichard.
Leave.
Representative Rigby.
Leave.
Representative Shalaba.
Leave.
Representative Stair.
Leave.
Online. I'm online.
Thank you. Turn it over to Chairman
Thanks, Glenn.
Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call on Christina to please call the roll of our committee.
Sure. Chairman Freeman,
Present.
Representatives Borowski,
Leave.
Donahue,
Oh, she's online now? Oh, I'm sorry. Then Representative Borowski is virtual online.
Representative Donahue,
I'm sorry, Donahue, leave.
Fleming,
Leave.
Haddock,
Leave.
Hambidge,
No, I'm online, Chair.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
That's okay. Appreciate it, Chairman.
So we've got him on virtual too.
Representative Hambidge,
She is on leave.
Kazim,
Leave.
Madsen,
Madsen's on leave.
Monroe,
Leave.
Probst,
Probst is virtual.
Prokopiak,
Leave.
Salisbury,
Leave.
Sappy,
Leave.
Smith Waddell,
Also on leave.
Chairman Miller,
Here.
Representatives Banta,
On leave.
Cooper,
On leave.
Fink,
She should be virtual.
Jones,
On leave.
Kozak,
On leave.
Kuzma,
On leave.
Reichard,
On leave.
Rinkavage,
On leave.
Quattro,
On leave.
Beekneck,
He's virtual as well.
Wendling.
Thank you. Before we begin, I just would like to ask if you have cell phones, just to silence them. Mine will probably vibrate a few times, so I'm used to how that works. Today's meeting is a very important meeting, and it's important that we do have local government with the technology. I'm moving my name. You all know who I am. As we talk about technology and what's happening in the cyber world, and we look at cybersecurity, we've seen it's cost millions and millions of dollars to local governments, school districts, and businesses, probably tens of hundreds of millions of dollars when we've had security risks and breaches. And as we look at legislation, we need to be cognitive of thinking of how we can all work as a team and work together and find solutions. So we're going to hear from different testifiers today on different areas of government and community to talk about the needs and the wants of how we can work together. I would ask that each testifier tries not to read their testimony. We have it all. If there's ever a pet peeve that you want to know what bothers Cerisi, is reading the 5 pages of testimony. So please, please, please don't read the testimony if you don't have to, which gives us all more conversation that we can ask questions and really get to the heart of the meat of it. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to hearing your testimony. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Chairman Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in order to feed that pet peeve, I will read my opening remarks. So Cybersecurity has emerged as a critical concern as local governments now extend their responsibilities beyond traditional infrastructure management to safeguard digital systems and critical citizen data in an increasing digitally municipal environment. Our increased reliance on information technology makes us more and more vulnerable to cyber attacks, which can threaten the ability of governmental entities to operate effectively. Equally concerning is that such attacks could also leak sensitive information about our constituents, whom these institutions are designed to serve. Cyber attacks have caused damage and leaked information for big multinational institutions with stringent standards, including banks and various international agencies. The integration of cybersecurity with local government operations is crucial for protecting critical infrastructure and reducing cyber risk. Without proper security, many essential services and sensitive information kept at the local level could be threatened by bad actors. I look forward to today's testimony and learning about the cybersecurity challenges facing our local governments and how the Commonwealth can help them to better protect their critical infrastructure and data information. Thank you.
So just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, you didn't submit your speech, so that
No,
was
I
okay.
didn't, so.
That we're good for that. Chairman Miller, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Each of us have locks on our doors. We have keys. And if those keys get compromised, we have to change things around because personal safety is at risk as well as property. Here we're in the state, big government, but what we're talking about here today is local government. Safeguarding the personal belongings, so to speak, the monies, the dollars, the infrastructure, all of it is critically important to our local people. And so this hearing is designed to retool those keys so we're more secure for all the people of Pennsylvania. So I look forward to hearing the testimony and us working together to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll allow Jim Rotiti, when he gets here, to say a few words if he chooses to. With that, I'm going to ask the first panel to come up. We have Randy Trezak, who's the Director, Masters of Science, Information Security Policy and Management Program, Deputy Director, Cyber Risk and Resilience, Software Engineer Institution, CERT Division, Carnegie Mellon University. And Heather Morton, Director of Financial Services, Technology and Communications for the National Conference of State Legislators. Thank you both for being here today. You guys could decide who wants to start first.
Yep, thank you. Sorry about that. So during my opening remarks, I'd like to focus on a couple of areas, focusing primarily on the prevalence of cyber incidents, looking at recent attacks on critical infrastructure, describing the ownership of the landscape for national infrastructure, and really highlighting the value of these public-private partnerships, including the role that FFRDCs can provide in securing national critical infrastructure. And then finally, I do want to briefly talk about some best practices related to securing information technology as well as operational technology. So over the past year, you've likely seen a significant increase in the rise of cybersecurity incidents, particularly in the public sector. Looking specifically at Department of Homeland Security, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, looking at the metrics that they are reporting in the 2025 year in review, the number of cybersecurity incidents reached 30,000 in terms of their 24/7 Security Operations Center. Looking at that number over the past 9 years, that's been a pretty consistent number, being over 30,000 incidents they're triaging on a regular basis. And looking across FISMA reporting to Congress, that number has been pretty consistent over the past 9 to 10 years. That's a clear indicator that the scale and persistence of threat in these environments has been consistent, if not increasing. And these incidents are not only limited to federal networks. According to a June 2025 Smart Cities Drive report, state and local government, counties, and even school districts saw a significant uptick in ransomware and third-party and cloud-based attacks. The main driver are legacy systems, resource constraints, inconsistent cybersecurity maturity, especially among smaller or underfunded agencies. And looking specifically at another report issued by the McCrayer Institute, Cyber Critical Infrastructure Security at Auburn University, they described non-U.S. state attacks, typhoon campaigns that really have embedded themselves into U.S. networks, not only to steal data, but to prepare for potential disruption of public services. An escalation in intent that should be concerning to all of us in the committee here. If you're not familiar with the typhoon campaigns, they really combine espionage, battlefield preparation, criminal tactics, techniques, and procedures, really signaling a shift in cyber attack surface, posing a growing threat to United States security. As we look at the recent cybersecurity incidents, critical infrastructure continues to be one of the most targeted and vulnerable domains. In 2025, DHS CISA, they issued an emergency directive regarding a serious vulnerabilities in the F5 big IP platforms. If you're not familiar with what those platforms are, they're widely used across federal systems that are looking to develop essential infrastructure environments as a way to make them highly available as well as secure as well. These vulnerabilities really escalate the risk of operational disruption across multiple sectors. In a report that was released last year by Mandiant, they reported that exploits of known vulnerabilities remain the #1 initial attack vector for public sector compromises. And the committee is likely aware of recent incidents, including one in 2024 against the American Water, the largest regulated water utility in the United States. They detected a cyber attack that forced the company to disconnect the MyWater customer portal and pause billing systems, as well as precautionary measures to shut the systems down. And also a second attack at a municipal water authority of Aliquippa outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The water authority had to shut down its operation technology systems after attack from a nation-state-backed cyber avenger group. So again, pretty significant attacks impacting critical infrastructure. You're likely aware of the ownership of critical infrastructure. If you're not, critical point for us to understand is really the U.S. critical infrastructure is owned primarily and operated by private sector organizations, not the government. Looking specifically, CISA, DHS CISA, underscoring the safeguarding of critical infrastructure requires tight coordination with private sector operators as well as the public sector agencies that rely heavily upon these systems to develop a security posture. And the ownership structure has direct implications on how we manage risk. Looking at any public sector organization, the cybersecurity strategy does need to include the private sector in that strategy, the building of it and implementation, as the bulk of nation's critical infrastructure sectors are owned and operated by the private sector. So really, I want to stress the need for these public-private partnerships. Given this ownership landscape, this is essential in order to secure critical infrastructure. You're likely aware of the benefits of these public-private partnerships. It does improve cyber resilience. It does allow for coordinated responses, resource sharing, but also innovative solutions can come from these public-private partnerships. You're looking here in the state of Pennsylvania, the Cybersecurity Threat and Intelligence Communication Unit coordinates information sharing among businesses, local governments, and federal agencies to enhance cybersecurity. The Department of Homeland Security has a significant private-public partnership as well, where they do share threat intelligence, produce cybersecurity performance goals to measure and address security gaps across the sectors. And other examples do include DHS's Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, JCDC. Other ones, the FBI's Domestic Security Alliance Council, DSAC, and InfraGard, NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, and finally Treasury's AI Executive Oversight Group. Again, as we look at this public-private partnership, looking at the 2026 federal budget adjustments, they may include staff reductions. Capacity in some of these cybersecurity agencies might be impacted, and if those reductions do occur, state and local governments will need even stronger private sector partnerships to ensure the continuity of threat intelligence as well as incident response. The role that FFRDCs can play in this can help to support things like risk assessments, vulnerability analysis, development of security standards and guidelines, testing and evaluation and security of technologies, cybersecurity research and development, information sharing, workforce development, and finally evaluating emerging threats. So as we look ahead, looking at some of the security controls, this panel, this committee's today, will focus on some of the highlights of what we can do to strengthen public sector organizations. I just want to highlight a few. First being starting with sound risk management principles. Second, adopting zero trust architectures. Third, strengthening patch and vulnerability management. Fourth, enhancing endpoint detection and centralized monitoring. And fifth, enforcing security access controls. And finally, looking at ways to invest in resilience and incident response planning. So in conclusion, cybersecurity threats to public sector organizations continue to increase in scale, sophistication, and ambition. Critical infrastructure remains a prime target. And because so much of it relies on the private hands, these partnerships are essential and indispensable. By prioritizing a risk management strategy, zero trust, patch management, identity controls, AI governance, and resilience planning, we can significantly strengthen cyber readiness. So I thank you, and I do welcome any questions.
Thank you so much. Heather?
Good afternoon, and thank you. Thank you to the committee chairs for the invitation to come speak to you today. I'm Heather Morton, and I cover cybersecurity and technology issues for the National Conference of State Legislatures. And I'm pleased to provide you with a brief overview of the recent state legislative trends relating to government cybersecurity and cybersecurity more broadly. Oops. There it goes. Excuse me. For those of you not familiar with NCSL, we are the country's most trusted bipartisan organization that serves legislators and staff for more than 50 years. We serve all 50 states, the Commonwealths, and territories. NCSL is headquartered in Denver, where we provide comprehensive and unbiased research on state policies and legislative institutions. We also have a small office in Washington, D.C., and their work focuses on ensuring that state legislatures have a strong, cohesive voice in the federal system. NCSL does not make policy recommendations, nor do we advocate certain positions to the states. Instead, we promote policy innovation and facilitate communication amongst the states. We do this because we believe in the importance of the legislative institution and know when states are strong, our nation is strong. So on this slide, at least 35 states, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. have pending legislation regarding cybersecurity broadly in the 2026 legislative session year. For the purposes of this slide, I'm including the legislation that's directed at both government as well as the private sector so that you can get a picture of the cybersecurity, that cybersecurity continues to be an issue for state legislators. Turning specifically more to the pending legislation regarding cybersecurity for government entities, and that includes local, states, local governments, and other political subdivisions, as well as schools. On this slide, I've listed the categories and the topics that we're tracking. Of course, on the list, it goes without saying, of course, appropriations and grants are always an issue. But first on the list are cybersecurity practices for governmental entities. And under this category, that covers having policies and procedures in place, whether a state agency can set minimum standards for the local governments or other political subdivisions. We're also tracking bills that set or require cybersecurity training for government employees, or whether or not they can pay ransoms for if they're under ransom attack. And then second in the list is cyber incident reporting. This category covers whether a state agency or a political subdivision, school, or even with third-party contractors that are working with those entities, whether or not they are required to report to, like, say, an attorney general or to a state Department of Information Technology agency or any other office if a cyber incident happens. Third on the list is limits on sharing of information through public records. This category encompasses briefing, if there are briefings or other reports that are filed, and whether or not those can be withheld from the public record, so that, one, to protect proprietary information, but and other sensitive information, but also not to just make it so much easier for the bad guys to find the data. The next two categories are go to some of Randy's comments, the tracking about whether or not states are requiring encryption, multi-factor authentication, or zero trust architecture. And that's just related to some more of those techniques that states are using. Next on the list is the cybersecurity legislation that's directed specifically at the critical infrastructure protections and requirements. Much like Randy mentioned, they're often, of course, focused on utilities like power, water, telecommunications, and any other services that are deemed essential and necessary by the state. And so connected to this as well is the issue of limiting the procurement or the use of technology that is coming or produced by foreign countries. There are bills that are directed specifically at limiting the technology if it's developed by a foreign country from being used or contracted with, or maybe even contracting with companies that may be based in foreign countries for that, for use at the critical infrastructure facilities, or even more broadly at just more generally, just using and purchasing that technology, and that can include like the unmanned aircraft or drones. Finally, on the list, there are a handful of bills that are directed at creating what would create civilian or reserve cyber corps. These are using volunteer cybersecurity professionals that can assist with state and local governments, sometimes even small business and other entities, when they're managing cybersecurity risks and also when they're responding to cybersecurity incidents. The idea is that these volunteer organizations can help fill the gaps, particularly in the workforce, especially during a cybersecurity event, because of course it is a challenge for state and local governments to hire cyber workforce because they don't always pay the same as private sector. Okay, so and then on slide 6, so there are several hundred bills that relate to both the government and private sector on cybersecurity that states are introducing every year. And so since we only have a limited time, I kind of breezed over very quickly some of those categories, but wanted to give you the links. So if you want to do a deeper dive and take a look at the full text of those bills, you can access that information. I also wanted to highlight that Congress has cybersecurity legislation that's pending that will affect the states as well. My DC counterpart, Barry Tabin, passed along information to me to provide that there is an update on the federal legislation for extending the state and local cybersecurity grant program. She shared that the program has been reauthorized so far through September 30th, 2026. But with the Department of Homeland Security partial shutdown, right now, no new funding is currently flowing to the states and local governments yet. She is tracking two bills. The first is H.R. 5078. It's called the Protecting Information by Local Leaders for Agency Resilience, or PILLAR Act. And that would extend that grant program through 2033, but she pointed out that it doesn't contain a dedicated funding mechanism. And then on the Senate side, there is Senate Bill 3251, which is called the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program Reauthorization Act. So that is also pending in the Senate. The House bill has passed the House. However, the Senate bill has not made it out of the Senate yet. And as I wrap up, I'm throwing in a quick shameless plug for the upcoming NCSL Legislative Summit. In case you're interested in attending, we'll be holding several technology-related sessions. It'll be in Chicago. And then on this slide, we are additional resources that you can access for NCSL, that NCSL produces just beyond my team, that we work on, on the financial services, technology, and communications issues. And then finally, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and provide this brief overview of the recent state legislation. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you like and provide additional information. And then, of course, my final shameless plug that if you'd like to buy a coffee table book celebrating our 50th anniversary, that is available through this QR code. I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. Does Carnegie Mellon have mugs or anything you want to sell during the meeting? Or? Yeah, thanks. Questions? Chairman Freeman and Chairman
Thank you,
Miller.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your testimony today. Appreciate it. Very informative. I am curious, are the vast majority of cyber security breaches coming from foreign powers and entities or from scammers that are just out to enrich themselves?
Please,
Oh, no. Go ahead.
well, certainly the stats that I spoke about today are what Department of Homeland Security is addressing as part of their report back to Congress. Most of what they're seeing is originating outside of the United States in terms of that specific report. You can follow up through the testimony in terms of a link of where that's coming from, but it's really a hard number to quantify to say that most are coming outside or inside. Again, as they research them, they'll be able to find out the actual origination. But yes, against federal networks and systems, I would say the majority will be coming from outside of the United States.
And most of them are actually being organized by a foreign power, or are they rogue terrorist groups or something like that?
I would say it's a combination of both of those examples that you provided. Again, I would like to dig more into the report with specific requirements in terms of how they cite the actual origination of each one of those.
Okay, that would be useful information for us to have.
Sure.
If
Again,
possible.
I did provide as part of my
Yeah.
testimony the links to the DHS FY25 report.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
One final follow-up question, too. You mentioned the value of private-public partnerships in terms of being able to provide for a more secure system. What kind of steps are taken to make sure that individuals in the private entity have been properly screened, not working for some other cyber security risk kind of person or entity?
Yeah, that's a great example that I'd like to provide through the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC. That's a recent release that was looking specifically at defense industrial base. The private sector organizations going through a cybersecurity model and verification of their credentials and the security of their IT systems as a way to verify and validate support provided to the federal government through those private sector organizations meet minimum maturity as it relates to cybersecurity preparedness. That's the best example, CMMC, that I could provide as an example of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Miller.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. As you know, Pennsylvania has 2,500 municipalities, 500 school boards, counties, and authorities. So each of them are facing this issue with varying degrees of technology or staff support or whatever. If a municipality or someone, some entity could only do one thing because of their limitations, what would you recommend?
Only one thing. Again, it's going to depend upon the mission of that particular organization. As we look at, for example, the Water Authority example that I cited here, certainly it's a combination of both physical and cyber preparedness that will allow for the availability of those water and water systems. So it would be a combination of physical security protections, but also cybersecurity protections, making sure you do things such as authentication and authorization. Multi-factor authentication is kind of the standard in terms of what the general cyber hygiene should be for all organizations, including those operational technology environments. So I would say in that example, it would be the combination of cybersecurity controls along with the physical security controls to make available critical systems like water, power, energy distribution as well.
Follow-up question. There's a lot to do with the changing technology all the time. Is there any emphasis on low tech? So, for instance, the cameras on your computer, whatever, the low tech is put some tape over it. Things like that, or not keeping your passwords on the computer, different things like that. Any emphasis on low tech applications that can be used to help safeguard their.
Well, certainly, given the fact that the typical description of the weakest link in cybersecurity is the human element, being people in the process, the protection of the passwords, strong passwords, encouraging cybersecurity principles to be implemented at the individual level as well as the organization level is the starting point for that. So to your point of the lower tech measures of protecting cameras as well as passwords, absolutely, that should be part of a cybersecurity strategy. So again, when I describe the highest priority being a risk management strategy for organization, the organizations need to step through a process by which they identify what are their critical assets, what are their critical processes, how do we secure those appropriately, and then who has authorized access to those critical assets as part of the protection strategy. So yes, the examples you provided, the lower tech should be part of that risk management and risk reduction strategy for each and every organization.
Okay, final question for me. I'm sorry, were you going to?
Thank you, Mr. or Representative. I think that in terms of the legislation, that it's probably covered by some of those training requirements. At least in terms of the legislation, they're not necessarily specifying between high tech and low tech. But certainly, I know, my organization, we have to do regular training, and it's, we're watching videos, that kind of thing. But it is, talking about, it's sort of simple things, but also more complex things. And so I think it is part of any kind of good training procedure that it would include sort of all aspects of security.
And last question. We here are responsible for trying to craft statewide policy for such a varied and diverse municipal and school arrangement. What would you recommend that we don't do from a statewide policy? What mistakes should we avoid in crafting policy?
I think I'm not sure that I have anything that you should for sure avoid, but I would say that I know that some states have more of kind of a like a federated system where they have more authority is in a particular state agency, whereas other states, and I'm like Pennsylvania, where you have so many different bodies, political subdivisions, that might not be that possible. But I think certainly working with the chief information officers or the safety officers, whatever each state kind of calls that person, I think is something that is important. We find we've had them come and testify or present at meetings for us, and they definitely want a close working relationship with legislatures and to make sure that they themselves have relationships with other agencies within their states. So I think that, I mean, that's probably the best way that I could answer that question.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone online have any questions? Okay, I'll ask them then. So a quick question is, as we're seeing AI get more sophisticated, are we able to keep up with how sophisticated this has become as far as cybersecurity? I mean, we all know challenges, but what are the biggest challenges that we're seeing?
Well, I'd say one of the biggest challenges is a challenge could be failure to recognize that the artificial intelligence tools and technologies can be used for the good of an organization, but recognizing it's also being used by adversaries to target organizations as well. Many times those organizations that are external to the organization are well funded, so not having the appropriate resources to keep up with the changes in technology, that would be one of the challenges that I would ask any organization to consider. Do we have the right resources in terms of time, money, people to be able to keep up with the adversaries that are using the advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence?
I would agree that it can definitely be used for good and for evil. So, and it does give that opportunity for tools. We see that my colleagues who work on energy issues, you see that that AI can be used to help the grid, but it also can be used to attack the grid as well. So absolutely can be used both ways.
And then from the legislation that you're seeing coming out of Washington, and trying to find the tactful way of saying this, that would be the first time you ever hear me say that. Are these just bills that they're putting out to placate the public and say we're doing something, or are these real bills that we're going to see passed and signed by the president?
The two bills that I highlighted are designed to reauthorize a funding program stream that was has been in place and that I believe has done some real good work for the states. As of course, as legislators, you know that appropriations and funding is always difficult. So these were definitely, the state and local government program was definitely designed to help states as well, and specifically local governments as well. So I think this is something that they're absolutely trying to get, reauthorized to get money to the states and to the local government to help them, because the states are struggling themselves to try to pass that along.
Well, thank you both very much for your testimony. Thank you. Our next panel is Thomas McLennan, the Director of Government Affairs and Strategies at Palo Alto Networks, and Dr. Justin Davis, Director of Cybersecurity Integration and Innovation at Unisys. Nice to see you guys again. See you. Am I missing one? All right. Thank you both for being here. Whoever wants to begin.
Just trying to share my screen here, sir. Alex, is there any way you could pull it up? I'm having an issue with my settings here. I got it. Apologies for that. Well, first off, thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate members of the committee for their time, for inviting Palo Alto to be here, be part of this very important discussion. My name is Thomas McClellan. I will not read my remarks. I don't even have remarks. I head up government affairs and strategy for Palo Alto Networks. Just by way of why you should listen to what I offer, Palo Alto, we are the world's largest cybersecurity provider out there, pure play. You'll see we represent 9 out of the 10 of the Fortune 100, 8 of the 10 largest banks, most of the world's largest utilities, and so forth. My role at Palo Alto, I've got an amazing job where I actually cover government affairs for the entire United States. So I do this across all 55 states, commonwealths, and territories. And I have a very unique perspective on what types of trends I see, in particular around how folks like you can help state and local governments develop and advance a more holistic, better run, more effective, more efficient cybersecurity ecosystem. And just, this is the only brag slide I'm going to put up there. What makes Palo Alto different is that we believe in what's called a platformized approach to cybersecurity, and you'll have the slides to see. But each one of those technologies you'll see are in the upper right-hand quadrant of Gartner and Forrester and whatever other metric you have. And the unique thing is that they all interoperate. And that point will become more evident as I kind of talk more about some of the threats that we're seeing. I'm going to talk a little bit about threats, and then I'm going to be very specific about 3 actionable items that you can take, that the state can take to begin to effectuate a much better partnership with state and local governments and how you can improve cybersecurity. The world is changing. The world has changed. There is no denying that artificial intelligence has changed absolutely everything that is going on and will continue to change from a technology, from a business perspective, from a living perspective. It is the fastest growing technology, fastest adopted technology in human history, and it will only continue to change. And from a cybersecurity perspective, it has changed everything dramatically. And in response to the question that was asked earlier, AI has changed the scale, the speed, and the sophistication of attacks that, as I like to describe, the haves and the have-nots cannot keep up without the assistance of AI, without the assistance of larger organizations that can actually help staff up. And so when you begin to look at from 2021 to today and what the projected is for exploiting vulnerabilities, took 9 weeks to develop some kind of capability to exploit that. Now it's like 60 minutes. So within our own company, again, world's largest cybersecurity company, we're seeing nearly 1 billion cyber events every day against our own security operations. About half of those are actual attacks. And the only way that we can do that is we're not staffing up. We have a staff of 12 security analysts that work 8 to 5. Chairman, as you know, they work 8 to 5. They go home, they work nights, they take nights off, they take vacations, they take weekend, they don't burn out. And the reason why is because we leverage our AI tools, and it's also what state and local governments can begin to do. When you also begin to look at some of the changes, there's a term I want you to become familiar about thinking about. It's called attack surface management. Attack surface management is what the bad guys can see of your network. It could be an unpatched vulnerability. It could be an IoT, an Internet of Things device. It could be something else that you don't know that's out there that the bad guys can see and can exploit. And when you look at the growth of artificial intelligence, the growth of cloud, the growth of IoT, your attack surface, in particular for unguarded municipal governments, K-12s, they just don't have the sophistication or the resources to really identify what those attacks are. And when you look at how quickly the bad guys can exploit it, it really becomes a very powerful story. So, something else that you probably have not been thinking about, post-quantum computing. The feds are certainly further down the path, with the exception of maybe 1, potentially 2 states, and Heather can keep me honest with this. I've only seen really 1 or 2 states actually taking efforts to look at how we begin to protect our states, our infrastructure, our K-12, our municipal governments, everything else from post-quantum. Post-quantum, like AI, will disrupt everything with respect to cybersecurity. All the keys, someone had talked earlier about keys, all the keys that you're talking about are now going to be out there, are now going to be null and void. What the bad guys are doing now, they scrape and decrypt later. So they are stealing data wholesale, stuff that's encrypted, they don't care. And to respond to your question, the bigger, hairier, scarier attacks are typically going to be the North Koreas, the China, the Russias, and so forth. That what they're doing now is they're scraping all this data in the hopes that when PQC happens, they can decrypt data that may not have the value when it's encrypted, but unencrypted. It could be intellectual property, it could be trade secrets, it could be health records, it could be anything like that. So you need to begin to think about PQC. So let's talk about some of the threats, state and local governments. And when you think about where states are versus the 23 or 2,500 different units of government here, the have and have nots. The changes at the federal level, the whole movement from the federal government leaning in on disaster response to really pushing it to the states. That has a disproportionate impact on local governments. And when you begin to look at the significant funding cuts, but also the capability cuts with Center for Internet Security, MS-ISAC, all those organizations really were out there helping states and local governments. I think they have about just under 20,000 members of MS-ISAC where they've been providing services. That has now been cut. So they need to figure that out. The other thing is there's a talent shortage. You can't afford to build your way out of, I'm not saying it's not important. It's very important to continue to build it, the talent pipeline, but you cannot do it in a quick enough time. You need, so if you've got a system that has multiple point solutions in there, and who's ever running that system needs to be certified on each one of those point solutions, and they're getting burned out because they're not leveraging the artificial intelligence tool, the orchestration tools. It is problematic. It's particularly problematic for local governments. So what do you need? We need to move from a fragmented, manual operation, reactive approach to something that is more integrated, that leverages AI and is proactive. And I will give you 3 suggestions. I have a lot more I can give you, but just for the purposes of this, and I hope I'm not going over time, sir. 1, have a statewide incident response retainer in place. So Palo Alto, we have our Unit 42. This is the bat phone. This is when things go sideways. You pick up the phone, you call us, we're there within whatever the service level agreement is at the time. I have seen states begin to say, you know what? I've got a particular county that I know can't scale. We're going to buy incident response retainer hours at the state level. So this particular county, I'm not going to make up a county because I'll offend somebody, that particular county can pick up the phone and say, hey, state, can you give us a hand? We can't, this attack has gone beyond what we can control. This came out of a real life fight with a ransomware attack against a very fairly large county that could not scale, and they were shut down for a month. They brought us in after the fact, and we had discussions with that state, and they said, why don't we do this in advance? I talked about attack surface management capabilities. One of the cool things about technology is it's scalable, it's extensible. We have an attack surface management tool. There are others out there. It's called Expanse, and what it does is it trolls through 99% of the entire internet every 15 or 20 minutes to look at different organizations to identify what those vulnerabilities are, what the threats, what the bad guy can see. We are seeing state and local or states working with local governments to actually kind of extend that capability out, and they can pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, Harris County, you have a weakness. Do you know this? The bad guys can see this. You need to remediate. At the top end, what we call a JSOC, a Joint Security Operations Center. This is an opportunity for you can have the pipes of different organizations, different K-12s, municipal infrastructure providers, point to a more centralized joint security operation. It allows you to do a couple things. One, it allows you to reduce that complexity that allows you to not have to worry on such a talent pipeline that just isn't there. And that's why we have 12 analysts dealing with nearly 1 billion attacks or 1 billion events every day. It also allows you to be faster response time. And in the end, we have actual research that shows when you take this approach, the ROI is tremendous. And I'm happy to do that offline. I'm not going to walk through these, but as leaders, I would ask that you do look at these. I don't want to take any more of your time, Justin. But take a look. There are things that you should be doing, questions that you should be asking. The highest level for me is when you want to understand cybersecurity, talk to your expert and say, what's your mean time to detect an attack? What's our mean time to respond? If it's 5 minutes to detect and 17 hours to respond, you're way behind the attackers, whatever that metric is. But thank you very much. I appreciate it, and sorry for the issue with the sharing.
Thank you. Justin?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Could you ask him
Is
to pull the
mic on?
microphone closer, please?
Off. How about now? All right. No. Awesome. But again, thank you for letting us be here. As you know, we've been partnering with the Commonwealth for several decades now, both on the technology side and particularly on cybersecurity. I don't have any slides because I do want to try to make this a conversation, and I'm going to bring us up to a little bit of a higher level, knowing that Thomas was going to come in and provide some really concrete examples of things like the Joint Security Operations Center and the different technologies that could enable cybersecurity more efficiently. I'm going to talk about some of the process and programmatics that could go behind that. And I'm going to cover 3 things. One, when we think about operational resiliency, that's our goal, right? It's to ensure that our systems stay operational so the governments can function. That's one of the #1 priorities when we think about securing them. That includes data protection to ensure that data doesn't get compromised, but ultimately when an attack happens, we want to be able to be resilient through that. So I'll talk through a couple controls there that are really important. Then I'm going to highlight and focus a little bit more on some benchmarking that other states have done where they've seen success in some of the stuff that Thomas had talked about earlier. And then I'm going to talk about an interesting topic that when we think about responding to incidents, a lot of time we want to educate our constituents on what they can do to protect themselves after data has been compromised. I'm going to hone in on that a little bit from the perspective of, in my prior military background, we think about left of boom. Before the data is compromised by a state or local government, that data might be compromised elsewhere. And how do you empower your constituents today with the right information to protect themselves? So in the first theme, we'll look at operational resiliency. And as you just heard, the threats are not getting any easier to deal with. The problems are very similar with ransomware. We've heard in the previous panel about the discussion about ransomware targeting local governments. That problem hasn't gotten any better. It's getting worse with the advancement of AI. So when we think about one of the fundamental things, and I won't say this is the only control, there was a question on the previous panel about what would be the one thing to do. There's certainly a plethora of things that need to be done, but one of the most important things to do is make sure you understand your network. As simple as that sounds, if I'm a local government, understanding my network is the very first part of the conversation. What are all the components of my network? How are they connected? what are all the processes that are dependent on the technology, that is something that local governments could be doing today, and they likely are. But having that understanding leads to a better conversation when they need help, whether it's going with a complex cybersecurity tool or just finding the right way to deal with things. The second part of that is exercising the what if. And when I talk about the what if is we have a term in the cybersecurity industry, assume breach, assume we've been breached. If I went to a local government today and said, the attacker is in your network, do they know how significant that is? Whatever device that the actor has compromised, does the local government know what the impact is? There's tons of information they're going to ask about the threat, but from a business impact or an operational impact, can we answer that question today? If the answer is yes, which is I'm optimistic that many will say yes, then the next step is rehearse what happens if that system goes down. Doing data recovery, understanding, hey, I've taken my backups and I've made them immutable, meaning that they can't be touched by an adversary. Can I safely recover from those backups in the time needed to make sure I can support my constituents? Those are just two foundational controls that can be done today. Understanding the network and rehearsing what happens when something goes bad. And then, of course, all of the other cybersecurity controls that go with it, things like multi-factor authentication we heard about in the last panel. There's legislation discussions about standardizing certain controls you need to put in place, endpoint detection and response, encryption, ensuring data privacy. Those things still apply. But if you don't understand your network and you don't understand how it's connecting, you're not going to be able to effectively decide which controls are most important, and most importantly, where to spend the money. So as we look beyond just the basic hygiene of a network and securing it with all the controls that we've been talking about in the last two panels, one of the most important questions that I heard in a committee testimony for the Senate committee about 2 years ago, the Senate's Technology Committee, when Unisys was testifying was, well, if we create all these rules, how is this going to be sustainable? How can we fund it? What can we do to actually resource this? And so in the written testimony, I provide a little bit more detail on some sourcing, but I want to talk about the state of Arizona. They have seen a lot of success creating very similar things to what Thomas was talking about earlier with resourcing a state-run program where they take some federal funding, which there was discussions on the status of that funding, state and federal funding to create a joint security operations center, and the state of New York has seen success with that. Provide cybersecurity services like multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, some of those key controls. So if the state is able to look at what Arizona has done, and maybe it might not be a perfect fit because of the way that the state is organized, but what the state could do is get some lessons learned from that and consider similar programs at the state level so that if you go to the state of Arizona's website, if you're a local government, there is a process and a path to yes to get endpoint detection and response on their systems today. That, from the perspective of a local government, would be extremely powerful. Going beyond how we look at the state networks and how the local government networks are secured, the last thing I want to talk about is a topic that's really near and dear to me because I have a lot of seniors in my family, and they constantly call me about getting scammed. And I know that there's been other committees about looking at senior scams. Well, something that's interesting is that the state of Pennsylvania has done a phenomenal job, at least from what I can see, of helping victims of identity theft understand what they can do to protect themselves from follow-on attacks or follow-on theft. Things like freezing your credit report, understanding how to recognize a scam. And as I mentioned the analogy left to boom earlier, imagine if we did that today, proactive messaging. And this is something, again, local governments can do today. They have access and reach to the constituents, and you all do as well. Your influence is critical. If you just set up a 5 to 10 minute discussion when you're having a town hall or having a meeting with your constituents, talk about fraud, talk about identity theft, and talk about what people can do today, like freezing their credit report. It doesn't cost any money. At the federal level, it is a requirement for all 3 credit bureaus to allow people to freeze their credit. Now, why am I talking about this here when we're talking about securing our networks? As a prior chief security officer, whenever we did incident response, which I talked about the importance of that at the local level, we always thought about how do we educate the victims? And the real victims are the people that have their data stolen. And the thing that's outside of your control is whether or not that data is stolen by somebody else. Whether it's on some other private network or if it's in a government network that's not your own, people move. Their social security numbers, their state IDs, all of that information could be out there, and your constituents could be victims of data theft, which means that at some point they may become victims of fraud. So the reason why I bring it up here, because there's an opportunity for all of you to consider and for our local government partners to get the message out there. Not just waiting for someone who's a victim of identity theft, but go left to boom. I thank the committee for the time today. I really wanted to stay high level so we could have a conversation, knowing that Thomas was going to talk about some of the technical details. So I chose to stay at the high level so we could have that conversation and then dig into the details. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Oh, well, we'll start with Chairman Furman.
I'd be happy to yield to the lady first.
Representative Rivera.
Hi there. I have one question. Thank you so much for the testimony and for the deep dive into, well, deep dive and then higher up dive. I do have a question about post-quantum computing that you brought up. It's something that has been brought to us in recent months, and you had said, I wrote down here, you had said that PQC will disrupt everything we're doing, but you've seen 2 states begin to address it. I'm wondering what 2 states we could be looking to figure out how to approach quantum computing. And then the second part of my question is, what do you mean disrupt even further? I feel like we're in disruption. What does further disruption look like?
I'll talk about one, because the other state, I know there's another state, I just can't find what they're doing, but Ohio. So for example, we just weighed in, Representative Heidi Workman in Ohio is leading an initiative to create what is effectively an advisory council on PQC, what its impact is going to be to infrastructure, to the state business environment, and to how the state actually runs. So they're actually beginning to figure out how do we get our hands around it. And I'm happy to share through Alex, through it's HB 650 is the actual language. The challenge in terms of disruption is that everything's based, and I'm going to get out of my skis very quickly from a technical perspective, but essentially, cybersecurity is built on different keys, different formulas. PQC breaks all of those things. So when you talk about multi-factor, if you have Okta, if you talk about the firewalls, the way everything works, it is a pre-quantum world in which we're in. What's happening is that given the power of compute, they're able to break all of those standard keys right now, or they will eventually be able to break all those standard keys. And China in particular has made it a mission, a nationwide mission to become the leaders in PQC, which is why they're currently now stealing as much data at every single level. They don't care what's in it. It used to be very targeted attacks. And so what they're trying to do right now is steal as much data that they can. It could be an R1, it could be a local school system. You just don't know what they're going to do and what they're going to steal, within the hopes of de-encrypting it later on.
Thank you very much.
Ma'am, I can weigh in on this too. I think one of the primary things that we're seeing organizations do, public and private, is consider, it goes back to understanding your network, understanding the algorithms that are being used today. Now that's a big word, and I know it may not resonate to a lot of people, but understanding what levels of encryption are being used today, that's one of the most important steps, because there's still work being done to replace all of those algorithms that are vulnerable. And so today what can be done is use like a PQC scanner to understand what's happening on your network, so at least you know where you're vulnerable. Because if there is a cybersecurity control where you can use what they call quantum safe encryption, you can look to implement that today, whether it's a Palo Alto firewall or any type of technology. But the key is understanding where you're vulnerable, because that will lead to a good risk conversation. Carnegie Mellon mentioned this in the last panel of having good risk conversations and understanding your inherent risk. I would call that the risk before control, right? Understanding where you're vulnerable and then making conscious decisions where if I can't solve the problem because it's expensive or there just isn't a solution yet because there are still some gaps as far as technology, at least I know where the data needs to be protected, and I can have discussions about should that data even be there. So if I'm storing social security numbers at a local county office or a local state office, do I even need that information anymore? A simple way to get rid of it, and that goes back to knowing your network. So it is a very complicated topic, as Thomas really laid out here, but understanding where you're using what they'll call pre-quantum encryption or the encryptions that's not quantum safe is a great first step. Because once the solutions start coming out, and I promise you, these vendors that provide security tools, they're going to immediately jump on it. Microsoft's doing research, Palo Alto's doing research and analysis. All the major technology vendors are researching this now based on the guidance from the National Security Agency, and the Quantum Initiative is at the President's committee that was started several years ago. But what you can do today is understand what's on your network and where you're vulnerable. And that will lead to decisions of, should we have this data? Is it stored in the right place? The thing you can't control is if you assume you've been breached, as Thomas laid out, that data may already be compromised in a post-quantum world. But understanding where that data was and where it is today could at least help you prepare for that, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And one other consideration, if I may, Mr. Chairman. If you're making investments now, whether they're large-scale cyber investments, whether infrastructure or state systems, you should be asking the question, where is this in relation to PQC? Because at some point, there's going to be shelf life to this regardless. But the notion is if you make an investment, could be tens of millions of dollars, and if it's not PQC ready, that investment may prove to be obsolete relatively quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Freeman?
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony today. It was very informative. It strikes me that from your testimony, there's a vital role for the state to assist local communities, that many local communities don't have the resources or the sophistication to be able to respond to these kind of cyber attacks. And the state can and should be in that position to provide the kind of assistance to respond. Is that adequate in your judgment in terms of most states, or does there need to be a very active, involved role by the federal government to assist with funding and other resources that might be more sophisticated coming from the national level?
Well, first off, thank you for the question. From a state perspective, when you begin to think about how interrelated all the systems are, and I mentioned a county earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That county plugged into this large state, and it caused some problems for the state too. It is, there's really no one system. There's the systems of systems, and they all touch each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is potentially incumbent upon a state to figure out how to provide for the safety and security of the entire, here as a Commonwealth. And so the notion is, I do think there's a role. Do I think it needs to be done with a stick or a carrot? I think that's somewhere in the middle. I think there needs to be a balance between that. But the reality is if you all have limited resources, but I somehow pool those resources while respecting the federation and the separation of governments, and I can do that in a way that's going to improve that mean time to detect, that mean time to respond, and it's going to maximize my security portfolio investment. That's a good. That's just, frankly, that's just a good. Yes, the federal government does play a role. What's interesting at the MSISAC, the Multi-State Information Analysis Center, which was ostensibly for a number of years basically an instrumentality of the of CISA out of DHS, because that's predominantly where their funding was coming from. They are now standing up on their own. They've got just under half the states have now come on to be members. I think the void is going to be filled, but I do know that the federal government has access to resources, to data, to skills that just states can't duplicate because of their size, because of their scales, and in no other way. And from a homeland security, from a defense perspective, if you had tanks pulling up in the capital of Pennsylvania, USG would not be here. I think there should be some expectation that the federal government should be supporting states when they're being attacked by incredibly well-funded, sophisticated attackers out of China, out of Russia, out of North Korea. Choose whatever that is. And I do believe there's a role, but obviously states need to lead the way, but I do think that federal government has to have a skin in the game as well.
Thank you.
Chairman Miller?
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. So which states are doing it best, and what is it that they're doing?
I'll let you take that one.
So, thank you for the questions. I think that the example in Arizona is really good to look at because they figured out a way to take the money and put it into action. State of New York also has a joint security operations center. They have figured out how to do centralized monitoring where you're basically ingesting information from the different localities and looking for threats, right? So setting up a centralized monitoring capability, that's a really good exemplar with the state of New York. And they also, from what I read on their website that is available publicly, they've had a lot of success putting out endpoint detection and response, the software that actually does protection on the devices. And they've been able to successfully get participation from their local governments to subscribe to that service that the state is funding. Arizona went a step further and they have more capabilities available. And I think what makes it most interesting to me is that if I work for a local government, I go to that website and I can see what's available and I can start asking the question. As far as legislation go, I think the last panel mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of legislation going out. Thomas brought up a point about carrot versus stick. If we think about this, if all we do is regulate and require someone to do something and they're not resourced to do it, they're going to be challenged. They're going to have a hard time doing it. Now, there is benefit to setting those standards as long as there's a mechanism for, when we think about it like a headquarters organization with subsidiaries in the private sector, if there's not a mechanism for states to come up and say, I'd love to do this, but this is what I need to do it, that informational flow back and forth is essential when you regulate. So if the federal government sets regulation out, it's probably really big, bold language of these are the things you shall do, but without the specific details. As you start bringing that down into your legislation that you've drafted at least over the last year and setting that statewide baseline of what is required, just make sure that there's a mechanism for the local governments to ask for help and consider what Arizona has done as an example. It may not be the solution, but the way that they framed it and the way that they resourced it could be an opportunity, sir.
Follow-up question. So which, and help me understand. So if you have a centralized approach, if the centralized approach gets compromised, then all are compromised. So what is the balancing act of allowing separate entities that are not part of the centralized and therefore immune if the centralized gets compromised?
So that's an interesting point. Thank you for the question. If we look at it from the security technology, there are opportunities for the bad guys to do things to the security stack, right? So we saw last year CrowdStrike had a public incident where they lost, and it wasn't even a cybersecurity issue; it was a software failure. But in the spirit of a denial of service or something in that regard, there is that risk. However, if you're monitoring if you bring it up to that level for security monitoring and provide security services, that monitoring also includes the cybersecurity technology. The difference is that I think the conversation dovetails into what autonomy do CIOs have across all the different organizations to buy and procure their own technology if it doesn't meet the state standard. If it's a centralized viewpoint of thou shall use this software or thou shall use this, that creates friction for autonomy, but it also enables a centralized monitoring capability like a JSOC to have a standardized set of information coming in to deal with as far as looking at the threats, looking at the exposure. So it is, to your point, somewhat of a double-edged sword when we think about centralized versus decentralized. Ultimately, what it comes down to with security technology, I would often lean towards it is more beneficial to have centralized capabilities so that you can streamline them, and then you can focus the security around those tools. Because you brought up a fantastic point, if I understood you correctly, is that there's risk that we induce into an environment when we install new software. Well, if it is a centralized capability, we can also monitor that capability. And it takes the burden off of, and that's where we get to the value, is it takes the burden off of the local governments to do that basic security monitoring.
If I could just respond in 30 seconds, I know we're up against time, sir. One is, and I actually want to answer both your questions, and I'll tie them together. I have not seen a business justification that says it's better to be decentralized and complex. I have seen many business justifications that show true ROI in real dollars, in real improved security outcomes by making it more of a collective defense, a whole of state, whatever term you want to use. I typically don't talk about centralized, but it's more of an organic, not organic. It's more of a coordinated approach. I have seen many, and we've got reports out there. I showed that 257%. That number came out of Forrester. And let me give you a real life example. You asked about what states where it's been effective, and we work with many different states, and without calling any, I'll call one out just because it's public knowledge. So the state of North Dakota, you'd be like, it's North Dakota. They're small. They're cold. North Dakota, there is an elementary school. I think they made an integrated school that was being hit, like A through K or A through 12th or whatever it was, that was being hit with attacks. And as it turns out, it was a nation state trying to get to the students in this classroom because their parents were working in the missile silos. So the governor at the time said, we're going to change what we're doing, created a whole of state approach where everything is centralized. They have now, and this is their number, not mine, they now can claim $400 million a year in cost avoidance. I don't like to say cost savings, but cost avoidance by taking that approach. And they have been incredibly successful, both with growing talent, because they train, they have student-supported SOCs, but they also continue to provide a very high degree of cybersecurity.
Thank you. Anyone online? Well, I want to thank the both of you. Palo Alto for your accommodations when we visited you. I know the chairman and I, Chairman Atitai, and both our staff members were extremely impressed by the services that you offer and how you offer it. And I think we got a great overview of the programs, and look forward to continuing to work. And of course, Unisys being able to come out to Montgomery County, a little bit different than out there, but and seeing the services and what we're using. And I think that, as we get more and more into this as a government, Pennsylvania tends to be behind the curve in so many areas, but our governor has been committed more and more to the technology and moving in technology. And so many people ask us, like we said when we were at Unisys, why we're not using more technology to be able to do things rather than sending a check in. How do you pay by check? Half of them don't have checkbooks anymore. But we will be more in touch with you, and I appreciate you and coming out here again and testifying on behalf of both companies. Thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, our next panel. We have Dave Glass from Clearfield County Commissioners, first Vice President of the County Commissioners Association of PA, CCAP. We have Craig Faunestock. I got it right? Okay, thank you. Deputy Executive Director of Members Services of the Pennsylvania Municipal Authority. Holly Fischel is the Policy and Research Director of the Pennsylvania State Association of Townships, and Kevin Buscher, who is the Chief Advisory Officer for the Pennsylvania School Board Associations. Thank you all for being here. Again, whoever wants to begin.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? You have our testimony. I do have a few brief prepared comments, and then I do have a few things I want to say at the end, kind of in response to what you've already heard. First of all, I am Dave Glass. I'm a Clearfield County Commissioner, first Vice President of CCAP, County Commissioners Association. Why am I here? Particularly, I have degrees in computer science and a master's in software engineering, which also had some pieces of cybersecurity with it. I'm a member and the former chair of our CCAP Technology Committee. It's a standing committee that provides guidance to the association on meeting county technology needs and providing services at that level. For those who don't know, CCAP represents all 67 counties in the Commonwealth. We advocate as the unifying voice of all PA counties, and we provide leadership and support for excellence in county government. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk today. We take seriously our responsibility as counties to protect personal information and the critical services that they offer and administer by implementing the best possible cybersecurity standards and practices. County technology leaders and executives actively participate in a wide range of local, state, and federal cybersecurity education and awareness activities and groups such as CISA and MSISAC, which have been named before. By keeping up to date with trends, threats, best practices, and general awareness, counties are positioning themselves to protect their information and critical systems from cyber threats and developing processes to respond if and when a cybersecurity incident happens. As the world continues to change from digital records and databases to cloud-based services to the use of AI, staying up to date on best practices and threats is vital, both for public and private entities, as has been discussed. Counties are obviously no exception. Working across county departments to ensure both business and cybersecurity requirements are being met is quickly becoming the norm across all counties, ensuring not only the systems are physically secure, but that county employees are up to date on good cybersecurity practices and behaviors. However, not only have cybersecurity needs driven most of our IT-related projects, but they also have driven our IT-related budgets for the last several years with no sign of decreasing. Obviously, cybersecurity needs have increased the pace of our technology deployment as we race to upgrade and replace systems that have been shown to be vulnerable, that have the most recent patches. I can speak a little bit to an incident that happened in our county in 2021. When I came in 2020, I immediately noticed that we were deficient in certain areas. I can tell you that I think commissioners are like most other people. They're good at repair, but they're not as good at prevention. And a lot of commissioners don't understand spending money on this stuff until something smacks them in the face, to be honest with you. So we got smacked in the face with a ransomware, and it knocked us down for 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the department. We didn't pay, but we had to rebuild. I was part of that rebuild. And I can tell you that after the rebuild, my colleagues, money was no object for upgrading what we had to do. So that was a lesson to me, and I think I'm trying to make it a lesson for my colleagues in other counties that you don't want to get to that point. You want to, ounce prevention, pound a cure, that sort of thing. Several state and federal policy changes have been added to county budgets, not to mention the increased price of cyber liability insurance, which CCAP provides that liability insurance to many members, and I can tell you that that is something that has become a real cost driver for insurance companies. We talked about the rise of cloud-based infrastructure and what AI is going to look like, what defenses are going to be needed to be taken in those cases. Counties specifically house a lot of sensitive data, case records, children and youth in particular, deeds, property information, court documents, elections information, and emergency services. Those are prime targets for potential threats. We testified in 2024 in the Senate about an incident in Bucks County's 911 system, and that's the sort of thing that keeps people like me and IT professionals up at night is an attack on an elections or a 911 system. I would be remiss not to mention the rise in technology and consequently cybersecurity costs for 911 across all 67 counties. It's been identified as a cost driver. County total 911 costs, and a part of our top priority for 2026 is increased funding for 911. While it's not tied to a state appropriation ask, counties are requesting that the General Assembly strongly consider raising the 911 surcharge to $2.20, in part to help counties cover the cost of such a life-saving service, including the cybersecurity part of that. It's important to note that we are being proactive for the most part on the cyber front. Due to those cybersecurity threat increases, CCAP, counties, and other local government associations are already working together to improve security definitions and implement vital cybersecurity initiatives. We conduct recurring quarterly meetings and an annual cybersecurity conference, security resources, and other projects. CCAP, OA, and DOS communicate regularly in an effort to expand and identify new areas of collaboration. While these intergovernmental partnerships have proven invaluable, we also support the establishment of a statewide cybersecurity coordination board to help coordinate cybersecurity matters across all levels of government in the Commonwealth and the private sector. While counties were eligible for funding under the federal, state, and local cybersecurity grant program, which was referenced earlier, this program only addressed a small piece of the required funding, and it is scheduled, as mentioned, to sunset here in September of 2026. We're seeking a reoccurring state budget line item to enable counties to continue to address and adapt to cybersecurity protocols and best practices as the technology continues to change. Additionally, we'd benefit from an increase in funding for the PA National Guard to help with cyber assessments and response. Over the past couple years, the Guard has been able to assist counties by performing cybersecurity assessments in an effort to identify areas that counties can strengthen. However, the efforts by the Guard have been limited due to their funding. I want to touch on collaboration. It is a key aspect of security, as has been mentioned already. Counties rely upon collaboration with the Commonwealth through the OA, collaboration with other counties through CCAP and MSIAC and the National Guard. At the end of the day, counties remain diligent in implementing best practices and working on our digital hygiene. Cyber crimes are becoming more complex, and while we are working to mitigate incidents, they are ultimately inevitable. How we handle those cases and prepare ourselves for any future incidents is key. Counties look forward to working with all levels of government, from municipalities all the way up to the federal government, to ensure we can protect our information, communities, and residents from bad actors. And now I just wanted a couple minutes to talk about some of the things that have been said already. I agree with almost everything that the gentleman from Palo Alto and Unisys said. I think they were spot on. And you asked earlier, somebody did, about what do we not want and what would you want in legislation. And I think it's important not to fight the last war. I think it's important that whatever you do is agile and flexible and adaptable, because the threats are going to continue to change. We've talked about it with quantum computing. If you put something in that's directed at the threats as we know them today and only today, it's going to be obsolete within a year or two. So you have to make sure, respectfully, that you keep it broad enough that it can be on its toes to allow everybody involved to react as needed. We talked about prevention versus rebuild. And the last thing I would say is that cybersecurity is like you're always playing defense, and the offense only has to score once. And so layered defenses are key. I think that centralizing is a wonderful idea, but that's the first layer, and then there'll be other layers that we can put in at the county level or the municipal level, and I just think that's the best way to go about it. So I thank you and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Cerisi and Freeman, Chairman Ortitai and Miller. I'll try to speak up. Members of the House Communications and Technology Committee and House Local Government Committee. Thank you for your invitation to provide testimony today on cybersecurity and local governments. My name is Craig Fonestock, and I am testifying on behalf of the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association. PMAA represents nearly 700 municipal authorities across the Commonwealth. Authorities provide essential services including drinking water, treatment and distribution, wastewater collection and treatment, solid waste management, and other community projects to roughly 6 million people in Pennsylvania. In addition, PMAA has over 500 associate members, and those are individuals and companies like attorneys, engineers, and other consultants that provide support to our member authorities. Municipal authorities share a fundamental responsibility, and that is to provide uninterrupted essential services. Disruptions caused by cyber incidents can pose serious risks to public health and public trust. Authorities manage sensitive information and operations data, and most rely on systems known as SCADA systems. And SCADA systems are the software and control systems that monitor and manage things like water pressure, chemical levels in water treatment processes, those sorts of things. These systems must function reliably every day. Authorities face the same type of cyber threats as other businesses and government agencies. Ransomware, phishing attempts, and network intrusions are all ongoing risks. On a routine basis, automated attempts to access networks occur and are regularly blocked, and that is simply the environment in which all connected systems operate. Cyber threats are persistent and ongoing. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence are being used to generate more convincing phishing messages and impersonation campaigns and attempts. Municipal authorities must plan for prevention and must also have response and recovery plans. This is an ongoing operational responsibility. PMAA supports its members through ongoing education and information sharing. I did bring a copy of our magazine, our bi-monthly magazine. It's called The Authority. And in October of last year, we devoted this entire issue to cybersecurity awareness and best practices. We also share federal and state advisories. We host webinars, in-person workshops, and we have an online member community as well as a podcast that we launched last year. And we use all these platforms to help reinforce cybersecurity awareness. The human element remains one of the most important factors in cybersecurity. Many incidents begin with a phishing email or compromised password. That is why many of our authorities have implemented security awareness training for their staff. Cybersecurity is not just an IT responsibility, it is an organizational responsibility. From our perspective, practical steps can strengthen local cybersecurity efforts. Cybersecurity funding grant eligibility for municipal authorities, a dedicated cybersecurity funding source, and a statewide technical assistance resource would support authorities in protecting critical infrastructure. Cybersecurity is not a static issue. It requires ongoing evaluation and adjustments as threats evolve. Every authority differs in size and complexity, but the responsibility is still the same, which is to protect essential public services. When those systems are secure and reliable, they protect public health, they protect our environment, they support economic stability, and they maintain public confidence in the services that people rely on every day. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Holly?
Thank you. Again, my name's Holly Fischel, and I'm the Policy and Research Director for the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, and we represent 1,453 townships across the state of all sizes, ranging from less than 100 residents and maybe one computer to more than 60,000 residents and a full IT department. As we've mentioned, technology is constantly evolving, and cyber criminals are continually becoming more sophisticated and using more of the tools available. We think municipalities across the Commonwealth could use additional training, funding, and expertise to help mitigate these threats. As I mentioned, there's a large variety of the sizes and levels of expertise in our different municipalities or different townships. While they all have sensitive information, a one-size-fits-all approach is just not going to work due to the size and level of expertise available to everyone. So again, we talked about education. Prior testimony talked about that's really a key to help preventing successful attacks, helping the end user being able to recognize suspicious emails, websites, and even phone calls. We've had that happen a number of times too. Bad actors regularly impersonate, whether it's the federal government, our vendors, utilities, banks. We've seen it all. Literally anyone with which a township does business could have their information used, or a bad actor could use it to impersonate that business. And we, again, keep seeing that continue to grow. And we're also seeing artificial intelligence being used to help generate some of those attacks. And increasing the number of those attacks. As we said, unfortunately, one click is all it can take sometimes to start compromising your system, whether it's, again, phishing attacks that were mentioned that can account for 80 to 95% of all attacks, and can trick somebody into entering, again, the end user often, to entering into account numbers or passwords. Townships are at risk for these just like everyone. And again, because email is a normal part of township business and you're getting them from the public, you're getting them from all over the place, including right to know law requests, that again can put you at risk. I did want to mention we are seeing more cybersecurity threats that can be disguised as open records requests or simply poor open records requests that look just like a phishing attack. And that's really become a concern for our members because you do have to take some time to evaluate those to make sure to see if it is safe to open that, because we do have a responsibility to comply with the right to know law. But again, should we be required to do that when somebody is not taking the time to just submit a request? We see a lot of requests from out-of-state companies and others looking to use public township records for data harvesting on our residents, businesses, and the vendors that we do business with. Again, a lot of that is public information, but again, should all of that information continue to be public, or should there be some additional protections, particularly when it is on, again, the vendors we do business with and residents and even our employees? Also, to point out, right now under the right to know law, it does fail to protect some critical township records, including credit card numbers, bank account numbers, passwords, and usernames. Those are not currently explicitly protected under current law. So we would suggest that something that should be looked at is to look at the right to know law to see if it should be amended, and we believe it should, to help protect taxpayer funds, reduce the risk of identity theft of our employees, and again, those we do business with, and again, eliminate requirement to respond to emails that look like a phishing attack just because they contain a right to know law request. Let's see. Yeah, we've seen cyber criminals impersonate vendors, change payment information on real invoices, and we've even seen them become referred consultants from subscription accounting software. Again, as others have mentioned too, with artificial intelligence, it just gives another tool that can be used for good, but it can also be used to help make these attacks look more legitimate and trickier to figure out that it is not real. And we need more education and training to help keep up. Yeah, identifying vulnerabilities and evaluating impacts can help stop an attack before it starts. Again, others have mentioned that network security, doing more multi-factor authentication, making sure we have regular software updates can help protect attacks from occurring, as well as doing regular data backups and have off-site storage for that information. However, I think as others have mentioned too, despite the importance of this issue, there just aren't a lot of resources available for that. I will mention the Joint State Government Commission just released a report in January that looked at artificial intelligence and did recommendations on the adoption and use of AI in Pennsylvania, and that does include some recommendations on cybersecurity, including, I think, some things similar to what was mentioned earlier, having some maybe state resources that could be available from whether it's third-party cybersecurity vendors that are recommended by the state or maybe on a list, IT professionals and cyber insurance companies. And we would, again, encourage the Commonwealth to look at providing some sort of materials and training programs to help local government officials deal with the ever-training threats and practices. Again, the commission report I mentioned talked about even putting a website together where local government officials could shop for different cybersecurity products or bundles to help you, again, leverage those to use to help their community. Again, we help look for grants or if there's revenue streams, whether it's leveraging available federal funds, although that also sounds like that may be going away, to help secure risk assessments and help secure local infrastructure. So with that, and the association has been trying to do things too to help our members, whether it's through our member services, doing articles in our magazine, again, trying to just help them identify, trying to identify some threats and put some better practices in place to help protect their data. So thank you.
Thank you. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Communications and Technology Committees and the Local Government Committees. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association and the 5,000 locally elected public school leaders we represent. My name is Kevin Busher, and in addition to serving as PSBA's Chief Advocacy Officer, I'm also a former 9-year veteran school director in the Lower Dauphin School District. Today, public school safety extends far beyond the physical buildings in which our students attend. Nearly every essential function of a school district, instruction, transportation, payroll, communications, special education, and student records, now depends on a secure digital system. And the reality is that Pennsylvania's school districts, intermediate units, and career and technical centers have become prime targets for cyber attacks. Across the Commonwealth, they face ransom attacks that lock down student information systems and payroll systems, phishing attacks that compromise credentials or lead to financial fraud, data breaches exposing sensitive student and staff information, and disruptions that force schools to close or suspend learning for days at a time. Most school entities do not have cybersecurity departments or the financial resources to deploy modern protective tools, yet they manage some of the most sensitive personal data of any public institution. To put the scope into perspective, a single student's K-12 experience generates years of personal and academic data, assessments, grades, health information, discipline records, transportation data, special education documents, PSSA and PIMS records, also all of which must be stored, protected, and maintained under law. An average district submits over 40 data sets each year to the state's PIMS system, generating millions of individual records. That massive archive grows every single day. The threat environment is escalating. Between July 2023 and December 24, 82% of K-12 schools nationwide experienced a cyber incident. And a single incident can shut down operations completely for hours, days, or even weeks. Cyber attacks can halt instruction, disable communication systems, delay payroll, compromise special ed, or medical documentation, and require months of recovery and forensic investigations, often at significant costs. Meanwhile, districts must rely on overstretched IT generalists, not cybersecurity professionals. They also depend on hundreds or thousands of third-party vendors, each of which have different security practices. Meanwhile, meaning school systems are only as secure as their weakest external platform. And the attacker never stops. Attempts to penetrate systems occur 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not just during the school hours. Given these realities, Pennsylvania's public schools cannot meet the challenge alone. We respectfully urge the General Assembly to consider some or all of the following actions. Provide dedicated recurring cybersecurity funding, not just one-time grants. Support modernization of network infrastructure, data backup systems, security for best practices, fund security assessments, penetration testing, and access and assess to cybersecurity professionals. Create a statewide office or agency focused on digital safety, privacy, and protection, modeled after existing structures for physical school safety. Establish clear cybersecurity standards for all K-12 vendors to reduce the risk of third-party platform invasions. Develop a standardized, non-punitive incident reporting process, ensuring schools can quickly receive help and the state can identify systematic risks. Cybersecurity is now one of the most urgent school safety issues affecting Pennsylvania's children, families, and educators. When a district is targeted, the victims are not just institutions. They are our students, teachers, and our taxpayers. Our school leaders are doing everything they can within their power to protect those individuals. But we cannot do it without strategic partnerships and support of the Commonwealth. We respectfully ask that we, as in the local governments, remain and maintain our partnerships with you, our General Assembly, in finding ongoing solutions. Thank you for your attention to this critical matter. I'm happy to answer any questions, and a more in-depth testimony is contained within your packets.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Chairman Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony today. Very, very important for us, and we appreciate your expressing yourself on that. In terms of the county level, I'll direct this at Mr. Glass. Do you see a possible role for the counties to be a sort of regional intermediary between the state and local governments? Something along the lines of almost a COG model, Council of Governments model, where they can be the clearinghouse for assistance, and not only from the state government, which today's testimony has pointed to as a vital role, but maybe the federal government and even national trends? Or do you feel that's a little bit beyond the scope of what the county can offer to municipalities and school districts?
With respect, it probably depends on the county.
True.
You know, a county like us, maybe. You know, we have about 78,000 residents, but just to my north is Cameron County that has 3,300 residents.
And you have
I see
Forest
no
County
way they
too,
could do
yeah.
it. I mean, they're smaller than most of my boroughs. So and that's the thing. One size doesn't fit all. I mean, 67 counties is 67 different issues. So I think I'm, and this is me, I'm very much on board the idea of a regional attack to this, you know, maybe like North Central where we have 6 counties and in various other things where maybe that could be your kind of in between, but going county by county, I think it would be a little bit tough.
Okay. Good response. And one last question for Ms. Fischel. You had mentioned that various phishing efforts or phishing attacks are tough to distinguish between legitimate right-to-know requests. What indications do you have on how you can identify them or distinguish them?
I mean, sometimes they will be actual real requests but they just look that way. They will be very threatening. They'll use a lot of language that everyone tells you if it looks like a phishing. It may have just the state's form attached to it, the Office of Open Records form. We've seen ones that said, oh, you needed to download this form to be able to, this format to be able to provide and answer the request. So there's just so many of them that they receive. And again, if it's just an email saying, here's my right to know request and it's attached, it's the PDF, it's the state's form, we understand that, but a lot of them, again, look bad. and I know the Office of Open Records has weighed in on it and says if your IT recommends not using it, not opening it, then you log that information and don't open the email further. But that's as far as they can go with their efforts.
So the Office of Open Records has provided some standards or practices to follow?
At least some guidance for it. And they've also, I mean, in the last, I think it was a year and a half, they updated their Open Records form because of a lot of the AI requests, generated requests that were being used.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chairman Miller.
Thank you all for your testimony. Kevin, I'll start with you. Of course, school districts operate largely within the IU structure. Has there been any discussion or consideration of pooling together resources in terms of security procurement or whatever? And this that was kind of along the lines of what Chairman Freeman was asking with counties.
Yeah, so much like Commissioner Glass's answer, it really depends on the IU. We have, a couple IUs that could handle that influx of inquiries, and we have a couple that just simply couldn't. But I think the heart of your question and Chairman Freeman's question is a good one. How do we coordinate, not just among school districts, among ourselves, but if we're facing an attack at the school district level, you know, our township that feeds into the school district or the county that the school district may be in is also potentially facing that similar attack, maybe from the same sender or a similar type of thing. So being able to talk among local governments is really important. Being able to talk across school districts and the myriad of issues that we face on a daily basis doesn't necessarily lend itself to being able to, you know, pick up the phone and call your county commissioner chair and say, hey, I'm seeing this issue. Are you seeing the same thing? Which is why it's so important maybe to have a statewide resource to be able to feed that information up into and then have a conversation among those entities that are experiencing the same thing. That way we can see trends at a state level. I also want to state, you know, when we talk about funding in our testimony, it's not just infusing more money, because we talk in education about more money, but it's allocating those resources. So the safety and security grants, the fact that we have to fill out myriad of forms to draw down on that money. If the money's already available, we should make it more readily accepted that these are some standards by which we can spend that money on cybersecurity efforts and not necessarily have to jump through more bureaucratic instances, whether it be through PDE or some other departments, to be able to draw down and fix those holes as we see them in the security measures. So it's not just more money, it's about making sure the money that's already in the system works smarter.
Follow-up question for all of you. This is a tough one. One of the things, as you know, when we deal with each of you respectively, the thing we hear from you is we don't want a mandate. So talk to me about that if we come up with some policy, just your response to that question. You know, because if we are having money, the public requires an accounting of that money.
Yep.
So there's that tension that if we want something accomplished, then there has to be requirements that it's being fulfilled. So
I'll start. Our North Star is always local control, and that's where we want to stay. But in the same sense, that's why it's so important to have us at the table, not just necessarily saying this is what you need to do, but having us at the table being able to say, well, that works for this school district, but not that school district. So how do we make it work within that framework? So having us at the table to be able to have those conversations, not just on the menu, I think is an important piece of this.
I smiled at my colleagues because I sort of anticipated that question would come up before we got here. I think that there's two pieces. Number one, I think the devil's always in the details, right? I mean, CCAP as an organization is open to the conversation of, you know, some kind of a mandate, some kind of a baseline, but what does that look like? How intrusive is it? Now, I'm going to kind of take my CCAP hat off and as my computer science guy and say, if any organization here doesn't yet have two-factor authorization, they really should. And that, you know, you want to talk about baseline that I think 99.9% of people can get behind, it's something like that. But back to what I said earlier, are you fighting the last war with whatever your mandate is? You put the mandate in, and now 5 years later, that mandate may not be as important. So to me, the mandates are less about specific software solutions and more about communication and collaboration and making sure that you know what we're doing. And that being able to ask us those questions, not just individually, but as he said, to have us at the table. We want to be held accountable. That's not the issue. The issue is mandates that are more harm than good, where I sit.
Greg or Holly, you don't have to opine, but if...
I'll just say, I mean, I think, again, I try to emphasize resources, trying to make maybe some more resources available as well. But I mean, I think the other points that were made with communications, and again, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, we've got members, again, that are very sophisticated and have IT staff, and again, we have others where it's just, one secretary with a computer, and that's got one computer, and that's all that's there in the office. So it's a different level of, they don't have the big system to take care of in that case, but they also don't have the resources. So trying to balance those different things, and again, I do think the communications, putting alerts out where there's certain specific attacks or certain things should be done in those cases, but it does need to be, I think, flexible and responsive.
I would just echo what Holly said. We experience the same issues. There's no one size fits all. They're all unique. All of our members have different needs. They have different situations. But there are some realistic standards that can be set. Dave mentioned multi-factor authentication. Those are simple things that don't require a vendor to purchase something specific for. And there are other things that are relatively inexpensive or low level to implement that, in the case of our members, would be, we talked about education. These are the types of things we talk about. We don't specifically tell our members what to do, but these are things that you should be doing, you should be looking at, questions you should be asking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Haddock is online. He has a question.
Yeah, I thank you. And back to the commissioners, County Commissioners Association with CCAP and Dave, you talked about your particular cyber attack, and it brought back horror stories of when I was the clerk of courts in Protonotary in Luzerne County, and we were under attack. And we did much like you. We worked out the with our IT. We were shut down for almost 3 weeks. Lost a tremendous amount of production, and of course it was at that time all hands on deck, and the purse strings were open because we didn't want to pay the ransom. And these things are very expensive. Can you share a parameter of what it costs besides the downtime, what the actual expense was? Are you free to talk about that?
Well, I think I'm free to talk about it, sir, but I have to confess 5 years down the line, I may not remember exactly what it was, but it was substantial. I can tell you that. And it was, you used the word all hands on deck. I mean, here I was as basically a first-year commissioner out helping with the rebuild scenario, partly because of my background, but partly because everybody was trying to get this thing back up as soon as we could. So the loss of production and the loss of usability and having to, push some court hearings and CYS stuff. I mean, I know we quantified it well into, 6 digits. I don't think it made $1 million maybe, but it's hard to even quantify some of the stuff that cascaded out from that. And I'm sure you talk to other counties, they'll tell you the same thing. It had ramifications for months.
Yes, I think sometimes we don't realize the need, and we hear in Harrisburg an awful lot about cost and keeping the budget where it's at. But when times change, and you're right, it was in the millions in Luzerne County. Yep. Thank you.
And to Commissioner Glass's point, many of my school districts that have been under attack or been forced to consider a ransom have had insurance, that we need to maybe look at that law as well, and how we can strengthen that law as to when we're paying an insurance for a possible ransom attack, that the insurance doesn't find loopholes by which to not pay or help us out when we're already paying up front for that. That's a taxpayer expense. So not to bring another committee into this field, but we need to be looking at the insurance industry's ransom regulations as well.
Well, I want to thank you. You talk about insurance with loopholes. That's what insurance is. Show me an insurance company that doesn't find a loophole. And we'll all become, part of their services. I want to thank this panel. Thank you for your testimony. I think that we've heard some very interesting testimony from everyone, but especially the four of you, because you're the front lines in our communities. And we were talking a lot back and forth about what we can do as a state. So it was the one thing of, well, why don't we just give the counties the money? Well, then you said, well, that really doesn't work because all the counties are different. Well, why don't we just give the school districts the money? Well, that doesn't work because everything is different. So how do we look at this from a state perspective and do the right thing to be able to legislate and to help all of you? Because we've heard the horror stories about the towns, school districts, municipalities, the cities that have been held hostage to the ransomware. And then some businesses, too, that don't have resources that they can go back to and be able to, get out of this. I serve on a board that it cost a lot of money to get the ransomware. And we knew Montgomery County had a couple school districts last year that came under heavy attack, cost a lot of money. So I think as we look more and more into this and working with our fellow members and other committees, you will see legislation. If there's ideas that you want us to do, please tell us, except for Kevin, everyone else could tell us what they want. But seriously, really tell us what you're thinking so we can put the right legislation in. We don't have all the answers. That's why we do these hearings and panels. I want to thank the companies that came out to testify and for your input. And again, we look forward to working with all of you, and thank you for your time today. Thank you.